I sold my condo and saved our family hotel from bankruptcy. But at the staff meeting, my parents announced my job was no longer necessary. I laughed and said, "That's perfect." They turned pale when the new owner walked in. I should have known something was off when my parents called for a staff meeting at the hotel. Something about the way they avoided my eyes, the stiffness in my mother's voice when she told me about it. But I ignored my gut feeling. After all, why would I suspect anything? I had given up everything to save the family business. The Lawson Inn wasn't just a hotel. It was our family legacy, a boutique hotel in Charleston, passed down from my grandfather to my father, and eventually, it was supposed to be mine. At least, that's what I had been led to believe my whole life. I had worked here since I was 16, scrubbing floors, carrying luggage, learning every inch of the business. My father always told me, "One day, this will be yours." Well, he lied. 3 months ago, the hotel was drowning in debt. The numbers were worse than anyone had let on. Past due bills, unpaid vendors, maxed out loans. My parents were one step away from foreclosure, and they did what they always did when things got tough. They turned to me, and like an idiot, I bailed them out. I sold my condo. I drained my savings. I even cashed out my retirement fund, knowing it would push my own future back by decades. I did it because I believed in this place, in what we built as a family. So when I walked into that staff meeting, I expected an update. Maybe some restructuring plans. Maybe a thank you. Instead, my father stood at the front of the room, cleared his throat, and fired me in front of everyone. After reviewing our current financial situation, he said, his voice calm and measured, "We've decided that Derek's position is no longer necessary." For a second, I thought I had misheard. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. I let out a short laugh, the kind that escapes when your brain can't keep up with reality. "I'm sorry, what?" My father sighed, like I was some child making a scene. "This isn't personal, Derek. We're restructuring to ensure the hotel's future." I stared at them. The people who had begged me for help just a few months ago. The people who had promised me a partnership, a future. I felt a pressure building in my chest, a mix of rage and disbelief. I turned to the staff. Maria, our head of housekeeping, looked heartbroken. Chris, the night manager, clenched his jaw, shaking his head. They all knew what I had sacrificed. And these two, my own parents, were tossing me aside like I was nothing. I took a slow breath, forcing down the bitterness. Then I smiled. Actually smiled. "Well," I said, "that's perfect." My father frowned. "Derek, I know this is unexpected, but let's be professional about it." "Oh, absolutely," I interrupted, still smiling. "Professional. That's exactly what I am." And then, right on cue, the conference room doors swung open. The room fell silent as the new owner of the Lawson Inn walked in. And my parents turned pale. Because the new owner wasn't a stranger. It was me. See, what my parents didn't realize was that I saw this coming. The moment I wired my savings to cover the hotel's debt, I knew there was a risk. I knew my father saw me as a temporary fix, not a partner. And I knew that if they ever got the chance, they'd cut me out. So I made sure they wouldn't get that chance. Instead of simply handing over my money, I did something smarter. I paid off the hotel's mortgage myself, which meant the bank owed me, not my parents. Then, I reached out to an old college friend, Travis Bennett, who owned a chain of successful boutique hotels across the East Coast. Together, we made an offer to the bank that my parents could never match. 2 weeks ago, I bought the Lawson Inn right out from under them. And now, it was mine. I turned to the staff. "I want to make something clear," I said. "No one who actually works hard is losing their job today." Maria visibly relaxed. Chris let out a breath. The staff trusted me. They had seen me fight for this place. They knew I was one of them. Then, I turned to my parents. "As for you too," I said, tilting my head, "your positions here are no longer necessary." My mother's hand shot up to her mouth. My father actually stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the table like it could save him. "This is a joke," he muttered. "You can't do this." I shrugged. "Actually, I can. We built this place," he snapped. "No," I said, stepping forward. "Grandpa built this place. You ran it into the ground." My mother's voice shook. "Derek, we're your parents. You should have thought about that." I cut her off, before stabbing me in the back. For years, I had been a good son. The one who stepped up, who cleaned up their messes, who made sacrifices they never even acknowledged. But that ended today. "You don't get to make decisions here anymore," I told them. "You're welcome to stay as guests, if you can afford it." A few staff members laughed quietly. My father's hands clenched into fists. "You ungrateful little..." "Careful," I warned. "That sounds an awful lot like insubordination." His mouth snapped shut. The silence stretched. Then, finally, he stormed out of the room. My mother hesitated, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she followed him. And just like that, they were gone. I should have felt guilty. But I didn't. I felt free. For the first time, the Lawson Inn was in the hands of someone who actually gave a damn. And under my leadership, this place was about to become something they never even dreamed of. This was only the beginning. The moment the door shut behind my parents, The room was dead silent. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the muffled street noise from outside. I took a slow breath, letting the moment settle, letting them all absorb what just happened. Then, I clapped my hands together. All right, let's get to work. Chris, our night manager, let out a sharp breath and shook his head like he still couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Jesus Christ, Derek. That was... He whistled low. That was something else. Maria wiped the corner of her eye, sniffing. You scared the life out of them. Good, I said simply. My father spent his whole life intimidating people, staff, business partners, even me. I had grown up in the shadow of his temper, always careful to stay on his good side, to avoid getting him off. Not anymore. Are they really gone? Maria asked hesitantly. I nodded. For good. A ripple of relief passed through the room. I saw shoulders loosen, tension melt away. I had known my parents weren't exactly beloved, but it wasn't until this moment that I realized just how much everyone had been walking on eggshells around them. Chris smirked. So, does this mean you're the boss now? I turned to him. It does. He let out a low chuckle. Well, damn. He extended a hand. Boss. I shook it, and that seemed to break the tension. A few others laughed. Maria clapped her hands together and muttered something in Spanish that I didn't catch, but I was pretty sure it was something about karma finally doing its job. Then, Travis stepped forward. Up until now, my business partner had been watching quietly, letting me handle my parents on my own. But now, he cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. For those of you who don't know me, he said, I'm Travis Bennett. I own a few hotels along the East Coast, and I'll be working with Derek to get this place back on its feet. A murmur spread through the room. The staff exchanged glances, some curious, some wary. Travis was an outsider, a businessman, and after years of dealing with my father's questionable decisions, I couldn't blame them for being skeptical. Chris crossed his arms. And what exactly does working with Derek mean? It means Derek is still in charge, Travis said smoothly. I'm here to help with funding, strategy, and expansion. But this is his hotel. I'm just the guy in the background making sure the business side runs smoothly. I glanced at him, appreciating the way he handled that. Travis was a smart businessman, but more than that, he was a smart person. He knew trust had to be earned. Maria nodded slowly, seeming to accept it. Chris, though, wasn't done. And what kind of expansion are we talking about? I stepped forward. The kind that's going to save this place. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could. The Lawson Inn has been sinking for years, I said. We all know that. My parents refused to adapt, refused to make the changes we needed to survive. But that ends today. The room was completely silent, hanging on my every word. We're modernizing, I continued. We're upgrading the rooms, improving the guest experience, fixing everything that's been ignored for too long. Maria hesitated. What about us? You all keep your jobs, I assured her. In fact, I'm raising wages across the board. Now, there was a reaction. Eyes widened. Murmurs spread. A few gasps. Chris let out a low whistle. Well, crap. Maria crossed herself and whispered, Dios mío. I saw hope in their faces, something I hadn't seen in a long, long time. Hope that things might finally be different. Hope that they wouldn't spend another year worrying about late paychecks, broken equipment, or another round of empty promises. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and I was just getting started. I didn't hear from my parents for the next 3 days. I expected a fight, maybe even a lawsuit. But surprisingly, they stayed quiet. Too quiet. That should have been my first warning. On the 4th day, I got a text from my mother. Mom, we need to talk. I ignored it. A few hours later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Then, that evening, I was in my office reviewing the hotel's financial records when Maria knocked on the door. Your mother is in the lobby, she said cautiously. She's asking for you. I sighed, rubbing my temple. Of course she is. Maria hesitated. Should I tell her you're busy? I shook my head. No, I'll handle it. I made my way downstairs, my heartbeat steady, my expression unreadable. I was done playing their games. When I stepped into the lobby, my mother was sitting on the old leather couch near the fireplace. She was wringing her hands, her face drawn and tight. She looked smaller than I remembered. For a brief second, something inside me wavered. But then she looked up at me, and I saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she was measuring her words before she even spoke. And just like that, whatever pity I had evaporated. She stood. Derek. I crossed my arms. What do you want? She winced. Can we sit? No, her lips pressed together. All right. She exhaled. I'm here because your father and I are struggling. I almost laughed. She must have seen the disbelief on my face because she rushed on. We're in a difficult situation. We had to sell the house. I blinked. You what? She nodded, looking down. We had no choice. Without the hotel, we don't have an income. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't expecting this. For the past 3 days, I had imagined my father sitting in some office, plotting his next move. Maybe calling lawyers, maybe trying to negotiate with the bank. I never imagined them losing everything. We need help, she said softly. Derek, we're still your parents. I clenched my jaw. You should have thought of that before you betrayed me. I should have walked away. I should have told her I didn't care. But instead, I found myself staring at her, my mind racing. They betrayed me. But could I really let them fall apart like this? I exhaled sharply. Crap. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I should have walked away. I should have let them suffer the consequences of their choices. But as I stood there, staring at my mother, I felt something I didn't expect. Pity. Not enough to forgive, but enough to listen. What exactly are you asking me for? I said, my voice even. She swallowed. We need a loan. Just enough to get back on our feet. I let out a slow breath, pressing my tongue against my teeth to keep from laughing in her face. A loan? After everything? I shook my head. Mom, I gave you everything I had. I sold my condo, my savings, my retirement. And what did you do? You fired me. She winced. That wasn't my idea. Really? Because you didn't exactly object. She had no response to that. Instead, she looked down, rubbing her hands together. I could see her pride crumbling, and it was a strange thing to witness. My mother had always been put together, always careful with her words, always looking down on people who couldn't handle their finances. And now here she was, begging. I let the silence stretch, making her sit in discomfort. Finally, she spoke. Your father is not taking this well. I scoffed. No kidding. She glanced at me, hopeful. Would you at least consider hiring him back? Now I really did laugh. A cold, humorless sound. You want me to give Dad a job? I repeated. After he threw me out like garbage? After he stole my future and acted like I owed him for it? Her face tightened. He's your father. And he made his choice. Silence. She inhaled sharply. So that's it. You're just going to let us lose everything. I leaned in slightly, dropping my voice. You didn't lose everything. You gave it away. Her mouth opened, then shut. I let out a breath and ran a hand through my hair. Despite everything, I wasn't a cruel man. And part of me, some deep, stubborn part, didn't want to see them homeless. So I made a decision. I'll make you an offer, I said. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. You can work here, I said. Both of you. Her face froze. What? You heard me. I crossed my arms, watching her process the idea. I'm not giving you money, I continued. I'm not handing over a damn thing. But if you want to earn a paycheck, I'll hire you both as employees. Her lips parted, then pressed together. Derek, I don't need an answer now, I said. Talk to Dad. See if his pride can handle it. And with that, I turned and walked away. 2 days later, I got a text. Mom, we accept. I smirked. Chris and Maria thought I was insane for hiring them back. You're really gonna let them work here after everything? Chris asked, shaking his head. I shrugged. They want a paycheck? They can earn it. Maria smirked. What are they gonna do? Management? Nope, I said. That's when Chris laughed. Oh, you are evil. My father lasted exactly 4 weeks. I made him the maintenance supervisor. It wasn't an easy job. It meant getting his hands dirty, fixing pipes, repairing broken fixtures, handling the things he had once paid others to do. It was humiliating for him. He was used to giving orders, not taking them. The first week, he refused to wear the uniform. The second week, he stopped showing up on time. By the fourth week, he quit. He didn't even tell me, just left his name badge on my desk and walked out the door. Mom stayed longer. She worked at the front desk, not as a manager, just another employee. I made sure she was treated the same as everyone else. She got no special treatment, no executive privileges. She had to answer to Chris, take shifts, deal with angry guests. At first, she tried to act like she still owned the place. She corrected employees, made decisions that weren't hers to make, tried to pull rank. So I pulled her aside. If you want to stay, you follow the rules, I told her. Otherwise, there's the door. She got the message. She lasted 6 months. Then, one day, she walked into my office, placed her uniform on the desk, and said, I can't do this anymore. I nodded. I figured. She sighed, rubbing her temples. I'm not going to apologize, am I? I studied her. I don't expect you to. She hesitated. Do you think we'll ever fix this? I considered that for a long moment. Finally, I said, I don't know. She gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. Then she walked out of my office, out of the hotel, out of my life. It's been a year. The Lawson Inn is thriving. We've renovated, rebranded, and turned this place into a top-tier boutique hotel. Profits are up. The staff is happier than ever. As for my parents, they moved out of Charleston. Last I heard, they're renting a small house in Savannah. My father hasn't spoken to me since he quit. Mom sends a text every now and then, but I never respond. I don't hate them. I'm just done with them. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And they broke mine first. A year had passed since my parents walked away from the Lawson Inn. In that time, I had transformed the business. The hotel was no longer a struggling, outdated relic. It was a thriving, modernized success. Bookings were up, profits were steady, and the staff was happier than ever. Everything my father swore was impossible under new leadership had happened under mine. One evening, I was standing at the front desk, chatting with Chris, when Maria approached with a hesitant expression. "You have a visitor," she said. I frowned. "Who?" She hesitated. "Your mother." Chris and I exchanged a glance. It had been months since I last heard from her. I sighed, debating whether I even wanted to do this, but curiosity got the better of me. "Send her in," I said. Maria nodded and stepped aside. A few moments later, my mother walked into the lobby. She looked different. Not just older, but defeated in a way I had never seen before. The expensive clothes were gone. No jewelry, no designer handbag. Just simple jeans and a plain blouse. For the first time, she looked normal. "Derek," she said softly. I nodded. "Mom." She glanced around the lobby. "The hotel looks beautiful." "Thanks," I said. "It helps when it's run properly." She flinched, but didn't argue. That alone was shocking. We stood in silence for a moment before she finally spoke. "I just wanted to say, I understand now." I raised an eyebrow. "Understand what?" She exhaled. "What it feels like to have everything you've worked for taken away." I studied her carefully. "And?" She gave a small, sad smile. "And? I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away. Did I need her apology? No. Did it change anything? Not really. But for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Regret. Real, genuine regret. And that was enough for me. I nodded. "I appreciate that." She hesitated. "Your father still won't speak about you." I shrugged. "That's his choice." She studied me. "And yours?" I met her gaze. "Mine is to move on." She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that. Then she smiled. A small, real smile. "You did good, Derek." "I know." She let out a soft laugh. "You always were a smartass." I smirked. "Runs in the family." Another pause. Then she sighed. "I should go." I nodded. "Take care, Mom." She gave me one last look, then turned and walked out of the Lawson Inn for the last time. As I watched her disappear into the Charleston streets, I felt lighter. Not because we had reconciled, because we hadn't, but because for the first time in my life, I realized I had won. Not in a cruel way. Not in a way that hurt anyone. I had won because I had built something better than what they left me. I had proved them wrong. They had tried to cut me out of my own legacy. And instead, I became its greatest success. I turned back toward the hotel, toward my future, and never looked back.